Well, I'll try not to disappoint.
I'm sure you won't, sir.
Me too, me too.
Our next presentation is AES and export compliance. And let me tell you, we are going to learn so much today and have so much fun doing it. Ring the bell! No, don't blow the horn, ring the bell. You got it. Right. Okay, let's take our first adventure here by jumping onto the Wayback Machine. This is something that some of us may or may not be familiar with here. It is called the Shipper's Export Declaration. And once upon a time, we were required to use that in our jobs to declare shipment information to the Census Bureau and Customs. Well, that form was abolished way back in October of 2008, and the SED, Shipper's Export Declaration, became the EEI, which stands for Electronic Export Information. It's shipment information that we enter into the automated export system used by the Census Bureau to compile statistics on international trade, also used by the BIS, the State Department, Customs, and ICE for export control. Provides proof of export to U.S. Customs for processing refunds, drawback claims, or other charges. Used to detect potential threats to the security of our country and our international allies, specifically through money laundering. And it's also used to analyze the impact of existing and proposed trade agreements with other countries. Let me give you a background, a history of AES. It was created to make collection of trade data more efficient and accurate. Promotes information sharing among multiple government agencies. It was first implemented way back in July of 1995, and our fine company became certified to use AES way back in March of 2000. The EEI is a statement to the United States government that the transaction occurred as described. The filer is responsible for the truth, accuracy, and completeness of the EEI. The EEI is an export control document. All information in the EEI must be true, accurate, and complete. Now, this slide takes me to a story that I'm going to tell you about a shipment that we handled some years ago by our Chicago Ocean Department. Shipment of toothbrushes. And this is a section of the EEI that was filed in AES Direct for that shipment. We got a call on that shipment from the Commerce Department asking us to verify the accuracy of the filing. Specifically, the person wanted to know if there were only 2 toothbrushes in the shipment, each valued at $6,458.50. And why she asked that question was because we had a quantity of 2, but the total value of $12,917. So you can understand why she was asking that question. So the moral of this story is that there are people watching and looking at the information that you file in AES. And if something doesn't seem right or doesn't look like right or seems a little unusual, they will question it and they will ask you to verify what you enter.
We get that usually I've noticed if we report over $1 million, we usually will get value. I've gotten a couple calls.
Right. Okay, the information entered in AES is based on the personal knowledge of facts stated or on information furnished by the parties to the export transaction. Now, who are these parties to the export transaction? Well, there are principally three of them. The USPPI, the United States Principal Party in Interest, otherwise known as the shipper or the exporter, the foreign principal party in interest, the consignee or the importer, and the authorized agent, the freight forwarder, which is us. Now this one seems to cause a lot of controversy. It's really rather straightforward in my opinion, but the regulations define the USPPI as the person or legal entity in the United States that receives the primary benefit, monetary or otherwise, from the export transaction. So who can these people be? Who is it that can receive the primary benefit of the transaction in the United States? Well, in this case, we are going to look at some business that we handle from Honeywell. Some of you may be familiar with this account. We handle some of their shipments from time to time, going to certain consignees that I believe it's principally routed business. As you see, it's a major corporation. They're into a little bit of everything here: aerospace, home building technologies, performance materials, safety and productivity solutions. Their stock has done pretty well over the past 10 years. It's had a good run. You may want to consider putting them into your portfolio. No charge for that stock tip. That's all gratis. You know, consider that a door prize for coming here today. We had the occasion to correspond with someone at Honeywell a couple of years ago regarding a shipment. It's business that we handle to ST Aerospace. Some of you may be familiar with that account. It's principally licensed aircraft parts going to Singapore. And they have various suppliers in the United States, and one of which is Honeywell. Well, we got kind of in a dispute with this person at Honeywell, questioning our responsibility to report them at AES as the USPPI. Their position was because we applied for the license on behalf of ST Aerospace, we should be reported as the USPPI. Well, I tried to explain to her what the situation was in the regulations, and I tried to say too that the term exporter of record does not exist. She used that, but explain what we do have available to us. And then eventually we had a favorable conclusion to our coffee clatch, whereby she agreed that we could report Honeywell as the USPPI and AES for shipments going to ST Aerospace. So, I want you to understand one thing. If you only remember one thing before you leave, after you leave here, remember this: exporter of record does not exist. Well, maybe it should exist, but it doesn't. We have importer of record in our regulations, but we don't have exporter of record. So a lot of people think that because we have importer of record, we should have exporter of record. Well, we don't. Now, the question often comes up: can KWE be an exporter? As described in the regulations, we can be an exporter for EAR purposes or for export control purposes. In plain English, what that means is that we can be the exporter if we apply for a license on behalf of the foreign principal party in interest. And for business to ST Aerospace, that's what we do. Now the question often comes up: can we be the USPPI in a transaction? Well, this is the definition here of the USPPI and the regulations. The USPPI can be a seller. Well, we're not selling the products that we are exporting. We're selling our services. We're not manufacturing the items that we export. We didn't order them. And we were not a foreign entity in the United States when the items were purchased. So none of these criteria apply for the regulations. I'll say we're almost never the USPPI. There are times when we can be the USPPI, but it's a mighty big if. Only 2 occasions when we can be the USPPI. If we are the importer of record for an import shipment, and our company acts as a customs broker, we cleared the goods through U.S. Customs, and then we re-exported them in the same condition that they were imported. Or the importer of record was a foreign entity, and Kintetsu was the customs broker that cleared the shipment. In these 2 cases only can Kintetsu be the USPPI and AES. The FPPI, Foreign Principal Party of Interest, is the party abroad who purchases the goods for export or to whom final delivery or end use of the goods will be made. The authorized agent, defined in the regulations as a freight forwarder that has obtained the power of attorney or written authorization from either the USPPI or FPPI on its behalf and to complete and file the EEI. So note that I say here we are to obtain the POA or written authorization from either the USPPI or FPPI. So how do we know from which party we are to obtain the POA or written authorization? Well, we listen to what is being said to us. It's really not that difficult. There is somebody in the transaction who has determined that Kintetsu is to be the forwarder for the business that you're handling. There's the freight in your warehouse just doesn't drop down from the sky and get there by itself. There's somebody somewhere made the decision to use Kintetsu for that business. And your mission, your objective is to determine who that person was, who that company was. So if it was the USPPI who is nominating Kintetsu to handle the business, then the USPPI must provide the POA or written authorization. If the FPPI is routing the shipment, then the FPPI must provide the POA or written authorization. This type of transaction is called a routed export transaction in the regulations. Now this is a message that I got from Keiko Masazaki about 2 years ago, asking me how Dustin should reply to a message that he got from one of his customers. And that message was this. The customer, the shipper, was asking them for a copy of the POA or a written authorization that they obtained from the consignee, which in this case was Ecolab Brazil. And the reason why they were asking for it is because we need it on file in our records to be sure the FPPI is given authorization for the export filing of this routed export. So Ecolab Brazil is requested that the shipper use Kintetsu to send their freight to them. So my question to you is, are you Dustin? Would you know how to respond to this customer? Well, if you don't, that's okay, because that's why you're here, and you're gonna learn how to respond. Okay, this was the message I sent back to Keiko. I said that the shipper is requesting from you a copy of the POA written authorization that was issued by Ecolab Brazil. I checked on the intranet. We have a list of all the POAs and written authorizations on file from all the customers that have provided us one. I didn't see it there, so I presume we didn't have it. So probably the most important thing here, the most relevant point to the people in Houston, was that if they could not provide the shipper Ascend Performance Materials with a copy of the POA written authorization issued by Ecolab Brazil, they were not going to handle that shipment. And you may ask, well, can they do that? Can the shipper do that? And my response is, yes, they can. It says that in the regulations. Upon request, the authorized agent will provide the USPPI with a copy of the power of attorney or written authorization from the FPPI. So yes, they can do it. And that's why you will get that question from some of your customers. And it's entirely legitimate question that deserves an informed answer. Now, this is a SLI, our own SLI, which I think most of us, if not all of us, are familiar with in this room. Understand that the SLI is a valid type of written authorization that the shipper, the USPPI, can provide to us. It is referred to as transactional authority. So if the shipper does not want to give us a POA or written authorization form, then they have to give us an SLI for every shipment. And then there are some customers that do that. Now understand too that because the SLI is a valid type of written authorization, a USPPI may refuse to provide you with an SLI in a routed export transaction. And that is because only one party in the transaction can provide you with written authorization, either the shipper or the consignee, the USPPI or the FPPI. So you need to keep that in mind and understand too that the shipper, your customer, can provide you with the information that you need to enter into AES in another format. An email, a letter of fax. They don't have to give you an SLI. Now this was a copy of the written authorization that we got from Ecolab Brazil. Eventually we did get it. And we marked it as such in AES as a routed export transaction. And this was the particulars of that shipment. 2-ton shipment, charged $3.15 a kilo. So I think they made a pretty good profit on that. So that was a happy ending on that one. But if things didn't go right, then we wouldn't be talking about a 2-ton shipment that Houston handled here. Now be aware of a resource that we have posted on our intranet. It's called the USPPI Responsibility Information Sheet. And it is published by the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association. It is a very useful document which encapsulates the primary responsibilities of USPPIs in an export transaction and a routed export transaction. And we have this document posted on our intranet at this location. Consider using it yourself as a convenient reference for major points of the regulations. Consider providing it to some of your customers who may be unfamiliar with the regulations. And consider, too, using it as a training tool for some of your employees in your office who may be unfamiliar with the regulations.
Hank, can you back up one real quick?
Yes.
I just want to jump in there.
Yes.
We're also going to post all of these presentations on the portal as well, so you'll have reference. Just something else for me to remember. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, you will. Now, we have boilerplates of these documents posted on the internet, on the Forms Center. And you'll notice that we have a space there for the EIN for USPPIs. We like to get the EIN because that uniquely identifies that customer. Now this one wasn't filled out exactly right. What should have been done here was put the name Atlantic Lab Equipment here instead of the individual's name.
Right.
So it's a good idea to review these when you get them to make sure they're completed correctly. And just, you know, if you're not sure it's valid, just send it to me and I'll tell you if it's valid or not. If it's not, then we ask them to issue another one. Corporate officer must sign a POA. What's a corporate officer? A president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, a chief officer of the company. For a written authorization, any employee of that company can provide us with that form. Be careful too when the form is provided to you. You want to make sure that it's filled out correctly. I think this person here may have misinterpreted what capacity was meant here. So since then, I've redesigned the form to minimize the chance of misinterpretation. Okay, let's jump back on the Wayback Machine here. This is a routing instruction. I have some examples here. Let's pass those around. This is something we don't use anymore. It was used way back when I started with the company in the Stone Age. And what we did was we would get this form filled out by the overseas customer, the consignee. And what it said was, you know, ABC company in Taiwan or wherever they're at, wants you, shipper, to route all your shipments that you have for me via Kintetsu. All right, and then our people then would send this form back to us by carrier pigeon, and then we then would take this form and hand deliver it to the shipper and say, Mr. Shipper, see, we got this signed routing instruction, a routing order that says that this company in Taiwan wants all their business routed through Kintetsu. So we ask that you honor this request from our mutual customer. Well, in most cases they would comply, not all, but I would say most. So you may ask, well, why am I talking about this relic from the dustbin of history? Well, I think it's applicable for this reason. I want you to think of the POA, or the written authorization, what we use today, as a government-mandated routing order. The government needs to see a chain of command, a line of authority in the export transaction. Which party is directing the export? That's what they want to know. And be aware also that if we are not required to file an EEI and AES for either the USPPI or the FPPI, then we need not obtain a POA, a written authorization, from either party as required. But at some point eventually, if it's long-term business, it's likely that we will have to file one. When you get these forms, you can just send it to our group email code or corrections, that opens a ticket, or else you can just send it to me directly and then I'll review it, and if it's acceptable, I'll post it on our POA list on our intranet. And this is where we have these posted. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you can look up and see the ones that we have. I have a copy of it there posted. And this is a good resource to see if we have one or not. Like as you know, there's multiple offices that may handle the same customer. So there's no need for every office that handles a customer to obtain a POA from that same customer. I mean, that's going to make us look like goofs. You know, we just need one, and that covers all the offices in the United States. We've satisfied that requirement. So this is a good resource for that reason alone. Now, valid EID numbers for a USPPI. The employer identification number, it's either 9 characters or 11 characters. If it's anything other than that, it's wrong, it's invalid. A passport number is a valid ID only for an individual who is a foreign citizen. Like me, Bob Feeke, I got a passport, but I can't use that as an ID if I wanted to export something. What I would have to do is I'd have to get an EIN. Now there's something you may have noticed. Among the selections in AES is a DUNS number, and that stands for Data Universal Numbering System, and that's used principally for entities that make bids to the government for government proposals. I would not recommend that you use that because if you, what's required in AES, which I've found out the hard way, is if you use this, you also have to submit the EIN. So if you just go with the EIN, you're covered. Now, this one won't die no matter how many times I stomp on it here. The Social Security number. It cannot be used in AES. It was eliminated way back in December of 2009. So say me, Bob Feeke, wanted to export something as an individual to China. Well, what I would have to do is I would have to go to the IRS and obtain an EIN. That's what the regulations say. So if you don't like that, write to your representatives in Washington and ask them to change the law, because that's how it stands right now. You'll see there, those are the only 3 valid types of ID for USPPI. It's the same in UFS as it is in AES Direct. Now, this was a copy of a letter that we got from one of our customers in Atlanta. I think it was like 2-3 years ago. And as you see there, they are in Canada, Skybeco in Canada. And they were telling us that because they obtained an EIN from the IRS, they could be reported in AES as the USPPI. So you see that, I mean, it looks like a legitimate letter from the IRS, and they got an EIN. I mean, it looks legit. So my question to you is, can we do this? Can we report this Canadian company with an EIN issued by the Internal Revenue Service as the USPPI and AES?
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because the government said we could. They gave them an EIN number, right? No,
well, they did give them an EIN, yes.
For what I would presume is the known purpose of exporting goods. So in other words, I mean, my original thought was no, because it clearly states Canada.
Right.
You're also pretty tricky at times, so I assume that don't go with my first gut. So I would say yes, because they could still track it. I mean, yes, it's not U.S. soil, but could it be the same to the effect of having an overseas bank account in Turks and Caicos where you're hiding money? They just have an EIN because it's coming from a bank in the U.S., even though their physical locations in Canada.
Well, does anyone, can anyone offer an alternative argument to what Patrick said?
Well, AES for Canada, I think we do as the car, right?
What, I'm sorry?
I don't think we follow AES for Canada.
Man, what, if we're, the US BPI is a Canadian entity?
Okay.
Okay, what, can we do that or not?
Yeah.
Okay, well, sorry to say we cannot. Because if you look at the definition of US PPI, it says person or legal entity in the United States that receive the primary benefit, monetary or otherwise, from the export transaction. Okay, if you look, this is a section of AES Direct here, and you'll see where you enter the US PPI information. Okay, for states, there's only states in the United States. There's no option to put in another country. I mean, you couldn't do it even if you wanted to. No. I mean, that's what we had to tell Skybeco. No, we can't do it. Regulations don't allow it.
I don't understand why the Treasury Department can give them one.
Well, I asked that same question. I did to the IRS. I asked that same question. I said, well, why did you do this? Well, they gave me an answer that I couldn't really understand. I mean, but according to our export regulations, we can't do it. So, I mean, it may have been some other reason. I don't know. Okay, post-departure filing. Originally known as option 4, but it was renamed post-departure filing. Privilege granted to approve US PPIs for their EEI to be submitted up to 5 calendar days after the date of export. Now this, for me personally, it's kind of hard for me to understand how there are certain exporters, US PPIs, where it is a hardship for them to report their shipment information pre-departure. Their position is they don't know all the information prior to export to be able to provide it to the government prior to departure. So they've made an exemption in the regulations that allows them to report it after departure. Now, currently, we're not, the government's not offering processing new applications for post-departure filing. There's a moratorium on that. Now, at some point, I know there was one of our offices who was thinking that when we declare a shipment as AES post, which is what you're supposed to do on F1 of the airway bill, they were thinking that they had to go back to the customer and get the ITN that they obtained from the AES, and we had to put that on our airway bill. Well, no, we don't. I mean, you just put AES post and you're done with it. There's no follow-up required. Yeah, and this is all you have to do here. And then when you put AES post, and then this will show up on your airway bill and your manifest. The 11-digit EIN and the date of export. All right, license value. That is a data element in AES, and it seems to trip up a lot of people. For a shipment moving under an export license, we are to report the value of the material that is authorized for export by the license. Is the value of the licensed material in a shipment that does not include any overhead, insurance, domestic freight, or other charges in whole US dollars. License value is not the value of the license. That's what a lot of people get confused about. And it's not the value of the license because we already know what the value of the license is. What we don't know is the value of the material in that shipment that is being exported against that license. And that's what we need to know. Now, it is useful to understand the license value by understanding what shipment value is. As described in the regulations, the shipment value is to be reported in the AES as the value of the goods at the U.S. port of export. Now, some of your customers may tell you to add on the inland freight to the value that you're reporting in AES on their behalf. And I've had some people tell me, well, you know, my customers tell me to do this, and I mean, this doesn't make sense. I mean, should I do this? And my response is, yeah, you should do it because that's what it says in the regulations. The shipment value is the selling price or the cost of the goods if not sold, including inland freight, domestic freight, insurance, or any other charges needed to bring the shipment to the port of export. So in this example, simple example of this concept, how it works. License was issued in the amount of $1,000. So you're handling a shipment against that license that's worth only $100, just a part of what was licensed. You enter $100 as the license value in AES. And then $100 plus inland freight, insurance, or any other charges needed to bring the shipment to the port of export is entered as the shipment value. License value never should exceed the shipment value. And if it does, then you know it's wrong. License value is less likely to be misunderstood if you think of it as licensed value. The value of the material that is licensed, not the value of the license. And why this is important, I mean, aside from being accurate, but what's happening here is that whatever is entered in that license value field is decremented against that license in AES. And what do I mean by decremented? Well, that's the government's term for crediting it, subtracting. So like say the license is worth $1,000 and then your shipment is worth $100 against that license. You put in $100 as the license value. So AES records that $100 and deducts it from the license value, the license amount of $1,000. And then it registers the remaining value of that license as $900. So it keeps a running total of everything you export against that license. So it's crucial that you enter the correct value in the license value field. Now currently, AES decrements the values against only licenses issued by the Commerce Department, the State Department, and the Kimberly Process certificates, which I've never handled, and it's probably likely you never will. It's only for authorizing shipments of diamonds to validate they were produced by reputable sources. Red flags. Hey, red flags. Does everybody know what I mean when I say you gotta watch out for those red flags? Hey, if anybody has taken the time to read the poster there that we have on the wall regarding red flags, those are things that you should look for in export transactions that may raise some questions, may raise concerns, may make you think twice about proceeding with the transaction. Things that don't make sense, things that make you a little nervous. Maybe the customer is asking you to do something that well, doesn't seem right. You know, maybe it seems illegal. And that could be a red flag. Now specifically, what may be a red flag? Well, products to be exported do not fit the buyer's line of business, such as an order for sophisticated computers to a small bakery. Item is ordered is incompatible with the technical level of the country to which it's being shipped, such as semiconductor equipment being sent to a country that has no electronics industry. Customer not found in an internet search. A freight forwarder is listed as the product's final destination. Customer is unfamiliar with the product's performance characteristics. Customer is paying cash for an item that normally would be financed. So when you see a red flag or something that may look like a red flag, this is what's supposed to happen. The light bulb is supposed to come on. Saying, I don't know if I should do this. So let me give you some examples, real life examples from our own company of red flags and how we responded. Okay, this is a shipment here from our San Francisco office. Held way back in 2014. Below email is self-explanatory. I have a shipper who does not want anything to do with the merchandise that she is shipping. She argued she is not responsible. They bought it from her. She doesn't own it. Not her responsibility. I get this type of shipper from time to time, but she is one of the worst. Ooh. All right, now this is a composite of the commercial invoice for this shipment that Haruni Ishii was talking about here. And you'll see here there's a number of different parties displayed here on the invoice. You got four different people, well, 3 different people as in the United States involved with it. And this was the description of the commodity. It didn't mean anything to me, so I went to the almighty Google to provide some insights, and this is what I got. This material appeared to be some type of electronic device used to enhance the capability of rifle scopes. So that kind of sounded a little menacing to me. So we went to the State Department and asked them about this shipment. And their response was these devices would appear to be Category 1H items as firearms accessories. A license is required for their export. So ultimately, this shipment was seized by customs. We notified customs about this, and then we were getting calls from I forget, somewhere in the Middle East about this. They were inquiring. They wanted to know the status of the shipment because we were just kind of sitting on it, trying to decide what to do. So it's kind of scary, really. But that was ultimately what happened to it. So that was good. That the light bulb went on. Not that one yet. All right, now another one here from a entity in the Middle East making an inquiry on behalf of Al Badaway General Trading in Dubai. They bought some fuel cell products from the United States, and they wanted us to ship them to Dubai. They gave the shipment particulars there, and they wanted to know, the estimate for the charges and the approximate transit time. So this initially came to us through our Detroit office. So I screened everybody involved, and I saw there was nobody came up on the any blacklists. So, but I said, don't provide them any of our bank information. I would say refer them to our office in Dubai so that they could vet their credentials and make sure they are a reputable company. Well, then they kept pressing us to move the freight, and then somehow our office in Los Angeles got involved because it turned out that's where the actual shipment was. I don't know how first it got to Detroit and then later on Los Angeles. But ultimately we decided to refuse to handle the business because, well, a lot of things. It would just seem kind of suspicious. The information provided on the commercial invoice didn't make sense there. You see there some of the things I noted. And then the address of the USPPI that they provided was a public storage unit in Los Angeles. So that didn't look too good. So we refused to handle shipment. Actually, we reported this to the BIS to tell them about it. And I mean, I don't know what action they took on it, but we did disclose it to them because it did not seem reputable. And this is what we decided here. So that's good. Light bulb went on that one. That's how we want to do it. Okay. Another one from Hiromi Ishii. Keeps lighting up the board here. Asking me, she got an inquiry from somebody in Japan asking her to issue 2 different versions of an airway bill showing different shippers on it. So she comes to me and she says, well, you know, I'm telling them no, you know, we don't want to do this. It just doesn't seem right. So I just kind of, you know, agreed with her decision there, and I said, you know, based on what I was interpreting there from Ken Sataki in Japan, he wanted us to create 2 different versions of an airway bill. And I said, no, we shouldn't do that because we're supposed to only have 1 version. That's how it works, you know. So light bulb went on that one. That's good. That's good. Okay. Now here's an inquiry we got from our office in Los Angeles last year, asking me about a shipment to Iran. Iran. Okay. Now that's when you hear Iran. Yeah, those red flags should go up. Okay. We can handle Iran, but it's got to be under certain circumstances. Well, this one didn't meet those circumstances. It said they want us to handle a shipment to Iran under the general license that's specified in the regulations for medical equipment or agricultural commodities that are authorized for export in the regulations to Iran. So they gave me the particulars of the shipment here. Now, the problem with this was the ECCN they gave me, which was 1C991. Well, that's not good. And this was the invoice, commercial invoice, provided to us by the shipper. Now, you'll notice here it's got expediters here as the forwarder. So, I mean, you know, I think they know the difference between Kintetsu and expediters, right? So I'm thinking what happened here is that they wanted to use expediters, and then expediters told them, go take a hike. You know, we can't handle your business. Take it somewhere else. And the reason why they did that was the same reason I gave our people in Los Angeles, because per the regulations, we cannot use this general license for any item classified with an ECCN other than EAR 99. If you have an item classified with an ECCN of other than EAR 99, you have to get a specific license for it. So if we handled this shipment, we would have been in a heap of trouble. So like what went on that? Okay, that's good. Now, I'm sorry to say there are sometimes when, well, light bulb doesn't go on. And it's not a good outcome. Not a good outcome. Okay, case in point, shipment that was handled by our Newark office. Some of you remember that we used to have a Newark office that handled ocean shipments. And for those of you who don't, well, we did at one time. Well, they handled this business, and I mean, I don't know if that was the reason they were closed, but that may have been one reason. I don't know. But they handled this business, and well, you may ask, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is it was going to this company here, China National Precision Machinery Import and Export. It wasn't in the customer profile of UFS. So what do? If it's not in the customer profile? Well, if it's a shipper, you use a temp accounts. If it's consignee, you use a general port code. And then you type in the name and address as needed. Well, that's what they did. You know, they used the general port code. Sometime later, after that shipment left, we had a special agent, Adam Roth, come calling, asking questions about this shipment. And the problem with this shipment was it was sent to this company that's on a list of specially designated nationals, meaning that they're a sanctioned party. We shouldn't be doing business with them. That's what it means in the simplest terms. So what happened was we negotiated a settlement with the BIS for our wrongdoing, and we ended up having to pay $30,000 to the government for that mistake. And that was the check that we issued. And if you go onto the BIS website at this location, you'll see a link to this incident posted there. And some of you may be aware that occasionally we will get inquiries from some of our customers about this incident, or inquiries from potential customers of ours who will research freight forwarders. And they'll say, well, you know, I saw you had, a problem here, 5 years ago. Tell me about it. What happened, and what have you done to make sure this doesn't happen again? So, I mean, it's going to be there a while. I don't think there's any expiration on when that gets taken off there. So be aware, like this company in China here, that there are people out there that we shouldn't be doing business with, and they are referred to collectively in different ways. People in our company refer to them different ways, and some of your customers may be referred to them in different ways. But these are the terminology that they may use. And it all basically means the same thing. And our government compiles lists of these people, and people that we should not be doing business with. Why? Because they are terrorists, or drug traffickers, money launderers, people who are involved with the distribution of weapons of mass destruction, previous violators of export regulations, warlords that oppose the governments of our allies, violators of human rights, and people associated with any of these people who do these things. The problem is, if we do business with these people, well, then our government sees us as being an accomplice to the actions of these nefarious entities. We are to be viewed as aiding and abetting in a violation, and that's not good. So what you need to be aware of is that you need to be on the lookout for these people. And who are they? Well, that's a good question. I would look closely at new customers, either shipper or consignee, especially those who are evasive when questioned about the use or end user of the material being exported. You want to be suspicious about shipments going to the Middle East, Africa, Central Asia, or to a country that has hostile or tense relations with the United States, such as Russia, China, Pakistan, Libya, Venezuela, that's a hot one right now. Parties involved in a shipment that raise a red flag. Now, some of you may be familiar with this device that we have on our intranet where you can submit an inquiry for us to screen somebody against the prohibited parties list to see if they are listed. We also have a consolidated screening tool that is available to you, say on the weekend. If your office works on the weekend, you can use this yourself and get an instant response. I would encourage you to make use of that and use that for business that is new, new customers, new shipper, new consignee. Now here's another example where the light bulb didn't go on here. We got an inquiry from the prohibited parties submit tool that I just showed you here from our Boston office. And they were asking me to screen this company in Hong Kong, Huawei International Company Limited. So I said, that's not good. And it's a little closer version of that. Now, what my response was here is that do not release this shipment from your warehouse until further notice from me. And the reason why I said this was because those of you who keep up with the news, and you should be keeping up with the news, however you do that, Facebook or Twitter or however you do that. But you should be aware, you should have heard the name Huawei. What I needed to check here was at this time, you'll see here, this came in February. This was before the government included Huawei as a sanctioned party. So what I wanted to check, and it was too late to check at this time, I wanted to wait till the next day to call the BIS to ask them, what exactly is the status with Huawei? Can we do business with them or not? So I just said, hold the shipment, until I can get a response from them. So Patty Egan tells me that we already had a shipment, but they were not the consignee. Our customer, Water in Hong Kong, had a drop shipment to Pakistan and said to have them show as the shipper on the airway bill. There was a commerce license involved. There's no mention of Huawei International on the license. And when the shipper got a copy of the amended airway bill showing Huawei International as the shipper, they got a little bit concerned. And they called them and said, what are you doing here? Why is Huawei International being displayed as the shipper on the airway bill? Because here was the license. This shipment was moving under a license, and you see here there's no mention of Huawei on here. So I don't know if you understand, but a license is a very serious instrument, and when the government issues a license, that means that there is no one else who is supposed to be touching this freight other than the people named on this license. Anybody else not named in this license, hands off. They shouldn't be involved. So, for those of you who are not aware, Huawei is actually it's Huawei Technologies is the company in question here. You'll notice that the one with the inquiry that came in from Boston was Huawei International. But I mean, still, you got Huawei in the name, so I mean that should raise a red flag. Largest manufacturer of telecommunications equipment, second largest manufacturer of smartphones. They are considered to be a security risk with the forthcoming 5G networks, because what we suspect them of doing is turning over all of the data that they receive from their networks to the Chinese government. They've been accused of transacting business with sanctioned Iranian entities and accused of stealing intellectual property from their competitors. Now, I concede some of this is political, but the fact remains that it is law, and we need to comply with it. And you may recall I sent out a newsletter about this last month, to be aware of shipments to Huawei. There are various different entities, and there are some circumstances where we can handle shipments to Huawei entities, but they are strictly defined, and if they don't meet the criteria as described in the regulations, then we are not to handle it. Be aware, too, of shipments to embargoed countries or countries of concern, such as Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria, Sudan. Even though Cuba is not a state sponsor of terrorism, and Sudan still is, we need to proceed with caution when we're contemplating handling shipments to these countries. The red flag should go up. They almost always require a license or another type of authorization. Almost always require declaration in AES no matter what their value. There are some exemptions, but they rarely occur. Now be aware too that what some people do, and they think if they do this, they're in the clear. They're not breaking the law. Like they'll arrange a shipment that ultimately is to go to one of these countries, but they'll transship it. They'll send it like to another country, and then they'll have instructions that from that country, say it's the Netherlands or whatever. When it reaches the Netherlands, then it's to be rerouted to North Korea. Well, the explanation is, well, I didn't do anything wrong because, I sent it to the Netherlands. I didn't send it to North Korea. Well, that's not an excuse, because you knew that material in that shipment was ultimately going to North Korea. So to say that you just sent it to the Netherlands and then you're done with it, your hands are not clean. It doesn't work that way. And the government is wise to all the tricks that are done out there. They've seen them all, so they check